I grew up on an island that was called the land of wood and water. But I also heard the phrase all my life that water is life. We can all agree that wherever you're from or whatever your profession, your area of work, that water is a part of it. And this morning, the Water Pavilion and partners are hosting this session on water, but more broadly, its role in the global goal on adaptation. And because we're in the climate change space and we like acronyms, GGA. That is one of the key and important topics that will be discussed here at the COP. And we anticipate that there will be some important decisions in the coming hours or days. With that said, and on behalf of all the organizers of this session, the Sanitation and Water for All, or SWA, the Nature Conservancy, or TNC, and the United Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR, welcome and good morning. Yeah. We're really happy whether you're here with us in person or you are joining online. We're grateful that you took the time to be with us and to be following this event. My name is Leanne Roper, and I am with the UNDRR office in Bonn. And it has been a pleasure to work with our partners in organizing this and other events throughout the day. If you will, though, please allow me to specially welcome our speaker for this morning, who is Alex Simala Bawi. I'm pretty sure I butchered your name. I do apologize, but please feel welcome. And I also want to say welcome to our team here, also those who are helping to support the technical side of the event, and anyone joining, whether live, online, or will be watching the recording. Before we look to the future, though, I think it's good for us to reflect a little on the past. I saw a quote from Maya Angelou, and I thought it seemed fitting to set the tone for the day. She said, "History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again." The truth is that the need for adaptation in this changing climate is not a new one, and we've already been seeing much of the impact very clearly. But here we have an opportunity to look to the future and to change and to create a different paradigm than the one from the past, to create a future that's different and better. Looking through some of the text of the Climate Change Convention that was adopted in 1992, it says that parties should take precautionary measures to anticipate, prevent, and minimize the causes of climate change, to comprehensively cover adaptation, among other things. In acceding to the convention, therefore, parties were making commitments to formulate and implement measures to facilitate adequate adaptation and to cooperate in preparing for adaptation. Developed countries also committed to providing the financial resources that countries, particularly developing countries, would need for adaptation. Fast forward to 2015, and we had the adoption of the Paris Agreement. Here we have in it what many may be familiar with, Article 7. And in that, it's established the Global Goal on Adaptation, or the GGA. Great, glad you're paying attention. And in so doing, it's to enhance adaptive capacity, strengthen resilience, and reduce vulnerability. While the goal itself is clear, the approach to get to the goal or to measure progress in achieving it are not. And that's part of why we're having this day. Many countries in their interventions over the past years, and including in some of the sessions that are being held here at COP28 or CMA 5, have been signaling that water is a critical part of the GGA. Whilst we do not yet have a final decision on what exactly the text will look like, it's clear that water is important, whether directly or indirectly, in how we achieve the GGA. Water is critical, and I dare say it is literally life. Today's events are designed to share views of various experts from both state and non-state entities. But these experts are setting the stage for us to interact and reflect together. The ultimate goal is that we add value to the ongoing discussions and to enhance our own knowledge through our exchanges. You do have the right to remain silent. However, you do also have the right to use your voice, to share your views and your perspectives. We encourage you to do exactly that. And with that, I say once again, we will welcome your thoughts, your exchanges, your experience, and so we can all learn and grow together. The event is being live streamed, as I said before, and it is available on YouTube at SIWI_water. Thanks to those at the Water Pavilion for facilitating this event and the ones that will come throughout the day. But to speak about what those are, I will now invite my colleague, Leslie Porres, who will take us through the overview of the day. Please again, feel welcomed and engage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome. Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited about the content that we're going to go through and discuss today. And so it's really excited to give you a sneak peek and overview of what to expect. And I hope that you think this is so fascinating you hang out all day. Oh, okay, I guess we're going to skip and go back and forth. All right, so this is what it looks like today. We've organized it into two large sections. The first one we've entitled, Just Add Water, right? As Leanne was already alluding to, we really are hoping and desiring that water becomes very present in the global goal and adaptation. So the first way we do this is when we host a panel and understand from the different dimensions of water security how water can really fit into the global goal. And understanding that not only from our particular professional expertise and insight, but from the broader perspective of water together. So we're all learning about what each other do if we're already in the water sector. From there, we're actually going to go into a workshop and break down what would be our key messages across these four different dimensions for water, right? And that's actually what we are going to do together, and we're going to jointly be able to create a list of bullets that if we talk to somebody else, we'll be able to explain, this is what we think about water, this is why it belongs to be present the way it, in the global goal the way it should be. From there, we're gonna take a break, move on to lunch, and then after lunch, we're gonna really get into the nitty-gritty of getting water into the GGA. What does that look like? We're gonna talk about targets and metrics, what they could be, why they might be hard, why they might be difficult. A lot of us haven't actually done this before, and so it's really good for us to get exposure and learn from the people who have that experience. We're going to really draw upon a panel. We're going to explore the different frameworks and the different targets from across the different dimensions that are already there. Hear from people who have worked on those, who helped develop those, who helped steward them currently till now. Then we're going to, again, break into groups and dissect those. What can be taken, what can be borrowed, what can be leveraged? And from that also understand what's still missing. What do we actually need to do? What is the work that we can help as a water sector really provide and input? And then from there, we say, what does that really take? And at that moment, we're going to invite country voices from government officials who work closely on their adaptation portfolios and understand from them what would it really take to have water targets within the global goal? What does that mean for them? What do they have to think about and work through in obligating themselves to something like this? And from there, we're going to review literally the process that Leanne already alluded to is actually happening right now, literally today and the rest of COP, and even then onwards, and talk about together, as a water sector, as a water community, what can we do? How can we support this system? How can we feed into it and ensure that that water is actually centered in the global goal for adaptation like we want? And at the end of the day, we'll actually run our ideas by a few friends and see what they think, and if these ideas really hold water, and move from there. So I hope that this has really excited you, and you're not going to leave. You're going to sit here all day long and hang out with us, because it's going to be really exciting. So, yay. And with that, I'm going to also now backtrack and introduce our keynote speaker to really kick things off. So it's a pleasure to introduce my colleague, Alex Similabli. He is Global Water Partnerships Coordinator Regional Director and Executive Secretary of Global Water Partnerships Southern Africa. And he also leads Global Water Partnerships' overall climate portfolio. You've been probably hearing about him a lot lately from a lot of activity generated around the Africa Water Investment Program. But today, we're really excited to bring Alex to talk to us about his actual experience working in adaptation for well over a decade. Alex has been a really important member of the Less Developed Countries Expert Group and was instrumental in really building the conversation around National Adaptation Plans, NAPs. And the result of that, we're also going to be featuring later this afternoon, includes the country Zambia, which is in the process of developing its very first water-specific national adaptation plan. And what can we learn from that? What can we learn from Alex's wealth of experience, as well as everything that has been happening so far with adaptation, and bring it now into this new phase of adaptation with the global goal? Alex, I'm so excited to have you here and sharing your insight with us and give us ideas for what we can take forward.
Okay, great. Thank you, Leslie. You make me feel like a rock star, actually. We actually have a crowd now. I think this is much better than 30 minutes ago. So thank you, Leslie, for that introduction. So as when I speak, I have the NAP. This was just launched about 2 weeks ago in Zambia, and I was fortunate enough to be present physically. So in case you hear about the NAP and what, it's one of the best NAPs, by the way. Of course. According to the UNFCCC, according to GCF, Green Climate Fund, and some of you have been involved in the development of that NAP. Yeah, okay.
You can use that one if you want.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about NAPs, and it feels great to be back because I haven't been around for some time in this conversation. If you can go to the next slide. But just to show you that I know what I'm talking about, what you see there are the photos of the launch of the Zambia National Adaptation Plan, which is about 2 weeks. That's the plan which you all have an opportunity to look at. And then, of course, I was invited, and then I was with the Minister of Water, Green Economy, who is actually here as well, and is currently the chair of the Africa Group of Negotiators. So very critical as well. So just to show you that this is concrete, this is real, and what I'm going to be talking about is stuff that is coming from the ground. But because we have an online audience, I decided to have at least one slide to be able to paint a picture of how things are related. If you can go to the next slide, and this is the only slide I'm going to have. So this shows you the relationships between the NAP and what we are going to be talking about in terms of the global goal for adaptation. So national adaptation planning, as we know it now in terms of the NAPs, its founding COP decision is rooted in the Cancun framework for adaptation from Mexico. I think some of you, I remember you were in Cancun, my brother John Matthews. We were together in Cancun, Mexico, and that's when they adopted Decision 1CP on the Cancun Adaptation Framework, and it's established a firm foundation for national adaptation plans, NAPs. Now, Some of you, I'm sure you are aware, and those online, that there's often a confusion between what's called NAPAs and NAPs. And it was confusing, and I still wonder why they had to make them so closely related. Because the NAPAs were from around 2002 until around 2010. And the NAPAs were National Adaptation Programs of Action. They were really short-term interventions to help countries improve adaptation, really short-term, very project-focused, but not really comprehensive in terms of national-wide and system-wide. So there was a need to say if countries are going to adapt and integrate adaptation much into their part of their systemic planning, there was need to have an instrument for adaptation that would mainstream adaptation into the medium and long-term national development planning at the national level, sub-national level, as well as the local level. So the NAP is really about that. And then, of course, COP17, this must have been in Poland, was really about the decision framing what the NAP should look like in terms of what its content. So the least developed expert group, the LEG, which is a body mandated under the UNFC to give technical guidance to countries on the development of NAPs, they developed a framework decision as well as technical guidance document on what the elements of the NAP should look like. Because at that point, and I remember a conversation in Egypt organized by UNFCCC, and I was invited to speak there, countries were like, okay, we have to develop NAPs, but what is a NAP? What does it look like? Is it a document? Is it a process? There were a lot of very vague expectations of, and not clear in terms of what the guidance should be like. So the guidance was provided in terms of how the NAP should be developed, encompassing 4 fundamental elements, what they called laying the groundwork. And then that includes the enabling environment policy, prioritizing your adaptation actions, your implementation strategy, as well as element number 4, which is called monitoring and evaluation. So that guidance is available under the UNFCCC. It's a very generic guidance with a checklist of potential indicators that countries are supposed to follow. And then zoom into 2015, Paris Agreement is adopted. And what was interesting in Paris Agreement, I think as I mentioned, is under Article 7. My colleague was very eloquent about that. Under Article 7, it established the global goal for adaptation. And I like this very much. Why do I like this? Because around 2013, when I was based in Stockholm, I went to visit a colleague of mine at the UNFCCC in Bonn, hosted me over lunch. And at that time, adaptation was very much on the sidelines compared to mitigation. And it was quite painful for those of us who were working on water. I do remember some negotiator talking to me and says, but Alex, you're a water guy, what are you doing here in Bonn? Go to the World Water Forum, go to World Water Week. This is about mitigation. This is about financing, making sure that those that have caused the damage pay for it's nothing to do with water. It was very, very painful. And why I remember that conversation hosted over lunch in 2013 in Bonn by a colleague was that he actually mentioned, they said, look, it might be helpful to have a clear target as part of the global negotiations on adaptation, because then that can begin to focus attention. When there's a global goal for adaptation, then naturally, because 90% of adaptation is water, then it becomes easier to be able to have arguments around water. So this is where the issue of the global goal for adaptation, in my view, really excites me. And they are fundamental instruments that feed into the input, are supposed to input into the global goal for adaptation. Number 1 is the NAP. As you can see, National Adaptation Plan is very, very key. Number 2 is the NDC. The NDC is overarching. As we know, it includes, of course, both mitigation and adaptation, and of course, what is called the national communication. Now, national communications have been there since many years, 20 years ago, where countries have to communicate to the UNFCCC on the status of the climate change, action they're undertaking in their countries, and they communicate to the UNFCCC. Now, if you look at those 3 instruments, which are under paragraph 10 and 11 of the Paris Agreement, the National Adaptation Plan is very, very core. Because the idea of the National Adaptation Plan is it should aggregate the clear targets and goals, which are then hopefully theoretically aggregated at a global level into the global goal for adaptation. Because the National Adaptation Plan itself already includes a framework for monitoring and evaluation. We should have a clear goal at the national level, clear target and indicators. So what am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say here is that if we would like to see traction on water in the adaptation goal, the starting point is the country level. We have to engage into the country level to guide the countries because, frankly speaking, this process is still very much controlled by ministries of environment at the country level. And the water ministries are often on the sidelines, and if they don't play an active role, if they are not capacitated to be able to understand about the elements between and the linkages between adaptation and water and the other sectors, it will very much still remain a climate change environmentally focused instrument. So capacity building at a country level, training the country partners, I think this is why I'm excited about what the work John has been doing with UNFCCC on capacity building of the countries on NDCs and NAPs, because they need to understand, and I'm speaking about our constituents here, our entry points, the ministries of water and water agencies, they have to be the ones to advocate. Technical agencies like us, Global Water Partnerships and National Water, can support, but it's the ministries of water, the ministers of water to engage their counterparts, the ministers of environment, to make sure that those goals are particularly articulated. And of course, linked to the national adaptation planning process, and at the global level is the global stock take. The global stake is supposed to establish a periodic framework for review. And of course, the first round is now 2021-2023. What are we supposed to be doing at the global level? What we're supposed to be doing at the global level is to, at the same time, try to advocate for a clear, measurable target on adaptation and water. There are conversations happening this week, today, as I understand, around the global goal for adaptation. The framing of that, we have to be very clear and very concrete and make sure that we influence the process. That it doesn't become a very fluffy goal, just which is so generic. Because I think for the first time we have an opportunity, and we have to do this closely with our partners, our colleagues, the food, health, and others as well, to make sure that the global goal and adaptation as well is very articulate and very concrete around what is it that is measurable. I've heard many things, the universal access for water, for all, human rights to water, SDG. I think we have to be more concrete than that. Why do I say that? There are currently 49 national adaptation plans that have been developed globally. That is 30% only out of the 154 countries that are expected, only 49. So far, if you look at the goals there for adaptation in those national adaptation plans, they're very fluffy. They're not very concrete. They're very vague. But anyway, it is a starting point because there's still another 70% that need to be developed. There is funding that is also available to help with the iterative process of these NAPs, because the NAPs are supposed to be iterative. So it's supposed to be a second generation. So the opportunity is not lost. But it starts by making sure that when we are here, we try and make sure that in the global goal for adaptation, we have a very concrete target on water, very specific as it links to other sectors. And then secondly, it becomes easier for countries. Because fundamentally, a national adaptation plan is about improving adaptive capacity, reducing vulnerability, and increasing resilience. That is fundamentally what the global goal for adaptation is. Increasing adaptive capacity, reducing vulnerability, and increasing the resilience. That needs to be brought down at the national level into the national adaptation plan as well. If you look at the NAP for Zambia, which I have circulated here, they reflect that as part of their scope. But they don't have a specific target around water. What can we learn from the Zambian process is that it was agreed under the leadership of the Minister of Water and Minister of Environment that the government would first develop a national adaptation plan overarching, involving all the sectors, and then there's going to be another follow-up sectoral NAP. So they have got their 3 million allocation from the Green Climate Fund. They used 2 million to develop the national adaptation plan overarching, and now they're going to use $1 million starting in January next year to do a specific water NAP, which is linked to the overall NAP. And this is going to be part of the overall process of what's called the national communication to the UNFCCC. So in terms of the linkages, That's how it's linked. And of course, we have the program on adaptation, the global adaptation, which comes from Glasgow and the Sharm el-Sheikh work program. And the key thing is now the assessment of the progress, starting now in 2024. So we are right like a few weeks to go. We have to be part of this process, and I think all I can say for now is that the opportunity to influence is there. The National Adaptation Plan is the vehicle for that. And of course, the National Adaptation Plan is very much part of the NDC. And within the NDC, adaptation is implemented through the NAP. So I think with that, I hope I've tried to lay the framework in terms of how things are related. But please, let's engage as much as we can. There is funding available already, as I've already mentioned, from the Green Climate Fund. More funding is required from the LDCF, because the process is rather slow, unfortunately. This is what the UNFCCC are telling me. It's too slow. The Zambian NAP is ranked as one of the best because, one, it was finished within 2 years, on time, but most of the other processes take too long. 3-4 years, they're still going and going and going. So anyway, I think this is all I can say, and I hope it gives a good picture of what we can do and the opportunities that are there for us to influence the global stock tech. The global goal on adaptation is 2 key entry points. At the global level, we have to influence clear, concrete targets. At the national level, we have to engage, provide the support as much as we can with many other partners. Thank you for inviting me on behalf of the Global Water Partnership to this conversation, and I hope we can continue. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Alex. This has been a very interesting reflections, right? What we're trying to do in this introduction session is to understand a little bit where adaptation is coming, a little bit the journey. That is not a new thing. Something big is going to happen, is about to happen in this COP, which is the global goal on adaptation framework, but we've gone already through more than a decade journey on adaptation. And we wanted to make sure that you understand that, and that this is clear. Also, to understand better what is it that we expect from the global goal on adaptation, and what do we think from a sectoral point of view it should be the ambition, because developing national adaptation plans is not a new thing. It's been there for more than a decade. The Cancun framework, it has been mentioned, it happened already in 2010. So we are in 2023, and the stakes are high, and we are calling for an ambitious global goal on adaptation. What I want to do now is also lay a little bit the ground so we understand better what is happening right now in the negotiations room not far from us as we speak. Just to tell you that we have attended the initial discussions in the negotiation room of the global goal on adaptation. The good news is that the opening remarks by several of the countries speaking on the negotiation room is coming, the water message is coming strong from many of the parties represented in the room. This is the good news. As of yesterday, the co-facilitator of the GGA negotiations was expected to deliver midnight, last night, the first draft of the text. The parties have kind of flooded him with submissions to the point that yesterday at 10:30 p.m. he announced that he could not be able to deliver a draft text for parties to continue discussing and negotiating. So the draft text is going to happen this morning, most likely at the time that we're speaking or in the next hour. The first draft text on the GGA is going to be made available to parties to continue engaging and discussing. Today, there is at 4 p.m., there is the next discussion among parties. So what we want you to understand is what we are discussing here today is live, it's COP28. We are at the Water Pavilion. This is happening in the negotiation room as we speak. And as Alex and the colleagues have mentioned, what is being discussed here right now has the potential to come to the ears and in written for parties to consider when they are drafting text and agreeing on negotiated text. So, a few slides from my side so that we get a better understanding. We have already mentioned a couple of times Article 7 of the Paris Agreement 2015 already outlines a global goal on adaptation. This global goal on adaptation is just, if you look at the Paris Agreement, is a few paragraphs. And what you see on the screen is the first paragraph. It's something, as Alex has reflected, is very vague. It just calls for reducing vulnerability and increasing adaptive capacity, as vague as that is. Monitoring the reduction of emissions in terms of the Paris Agreement is not an easy task, but it's much more simple, if you like. Monitoring emissions of CO2 or methane is fairly simple if you compare to monitoring how are we globally reducing vulnerability or increasing adaptive capacity. How could we measure that? Just think a little bit. It's like, do we have any instruments that allow us now globally to take a stock? We're taking a stock here in COP28. We're taking a stock, right? Can we take a stock on how well did the world do in the last few years in reducing vulnerability or increasing adaptive capacity? The only instruments we have are the national adaptation plans, and as we have heard, there are only 49 in place. And yet, since 2011, the world was called to develop national adaptation plans. We have already mentioned, and it's important that we all understand, there is a 2-year work program that Alex has already mentioned. It's called the Glasgow Summer Shake Work Program on the Global Goal on Adaptation. Parties to the Paris Agreement have been, over the last 2 years, discussing through this work program how the global goal on adaptation that is going to be delivered on December 12th will look like. It's been 2 years of discussion. The rationale of this work program is the problem that we don't have the instruments to understand how to monitor progress on the global goal on adaptation. The Article 7 of the Paris Agreement, as we see, is very vague, and it was decided that a work program could aim at bringing clarity globally on how to monitor progress. Obviously, the challenges include the lack of universal and global metrics to measure, right, the progress. It is important that we understand the negotiation is happening right now, and by the end of this COP, one of the key outcomes of COP28 is the end of this work program and the agreement on a global goal on adaptation framework. So, the 2-year program that it was established started to work in 2022. It's gone 2022, 2023, coming to an end now. The TOR, let's say, the terms of reference for this work program is to enable the full and sustainable implementation of the Paris Agreement Article 7. It is supposed to support the understanding and come with methodologies and indicators and data metrics. This was outlined the first day. So they are expected to come up with indicators and metrics that is helping us to progress, to understand what is the progress on adaptation. It is supposed to contribute to informing the current global stocktake and subsequent global stocktakes. And it is expected to deliver appropriate systems for monitoring and evaluation adaptation options. Just want to, for you to understand what it's been on discussion. It's been 2 years of discussions. In 2022, there were 4 workshops, 4 thematic workshops under this work program on the global goal on adaptation. The first workshop was on enhancing understanding of the global goal on adaptation. The second one was on enhancing adaptation action and support. The third one was already going into methodologies and indicators. And the fourth one went about communicating and reporting on adaptation priorities. The highlight on 2022 was actually in COP27 in Summer Shake, when after very complicated discussions, and we were in the negotiation rooms as observers, we gave testimony on the difficulties that parties had to agree on a framework. But a framework was agreed last year at COP27. When we said that a framework was agreed, for you to visualize, and I have the next slide, you will visualize a little bit what that means. A framework was agreed outlining 3 key things, which are dimensions of the adaptation policy cycle, there were themes that were agreed, and it's for the first time we saw that water at COP27, it was agreed as one of the several themes that made it into the COP decision. Water together with food, with agriculture, with cities, settlements, key infrastructure, with health, poverty, livelihoods, etc., freshwater ecosystems. These themes were outlined in the decision that, that it was taken at COP27. I just want to show you, because during last year up to COP27, water was not really prominently part of these workshops and the discussions, but I'm just showing you when it came to metrics, some of the things where we could already start to see water like written down in the summaries of these reports in 2022. We see, you know, in terms of indicators, ideas were bounced in terms of water and irrigation, number of local infrastructures that could be made more resilient to climate change, was a little bit like vague references already to water in relation to the discussions on indicators in 2022. But the framework that I was referring to, and this is a snapshot taken from the actual decision that outlines dimensions and themes. And again, this is part of the decision that it was taken at COP27. Here, the dimensions, is very important to understand what is this about, because the negotiations right now, as we speak, are around on at which level the targets of the global goal on adaptation are being set. The discussions are going whether the targets for the global goal on adaptation are set around the dimensions of the policy cycle, and it's important that you understand what it means. The dimensions of the policy cycle are four. Its impacts, vulnerability, and risk analysis is the first step of the dimensions. The second one is planning for adaptation. The third one is implementation, and the fourth one is monitoring. There is nothing revolutionary with this adaptation cycle, right? It's nothing really out of the extraordinary. It's very basic. I'm telling you because if targets are set at this level, it doesn't look very concrete. Look what Alex was referring to. Targets at the global level, if they are set around this policy cycle, these generic things, we run the risk that things remain very generic yet. The discussion among parties goes whether the targets will go in that direction, and it's very likely that targets at this point of the discussion, targets will be set through the dimensions, which will be process targets, or targets are set at that theme level, right? Having targets at the thematic level means having a target for water, adaptation, having a target for health, having a target for food security in relation to adaptation. This is what it's on stake right now, the level at which the targets are going to be set. It's important that you understand this because this is exactly what is going on right now. This is what happened 2 days ago in the negotiation room, and this is what we will see today in the draft text. In the draft text that is released today, we're going to take the temperature and we will see at which level the targets are being set. 2023, and I will go fast now. In 2023, we have had 4 other workshops. I've been participating of the 4 workshops. I've been there. I've seen what has happened. Workshop number 5 was very much about trying to explain that adaptation as we know it, or as we don't know it, is not enough. And it was about transformative adaptation. It's a complicated term. The IPCC was explaining during that workshop what transformative adaptation means. If it's clear, it's not very clear to me, but it's a complicated term, but we spent a large amount of time discussing what transformative adaptation is. Workshop 6 was very interesting because it was a second wave of discussions on targets, and target setting, metrics, and methodologies. During this workshop, 26 targets were already put on the table for those parties attending and observers attending to start working on these 26 targets just to feel the temperature of of what could happen. It was a mega mix, I could say, of targets at the dimensions level that I explained before, and some of them at the thematic level. It was the first cut, 26 targets, and we, during the workshop, worked with trying to group them, trying to see whether they were ambitious enough, whether it could be measured or not measured, etc. Workshop 7 and 8 took part during the second part of 2023. And actually, because the target setting is the most prominent discussion within this work program, actually this discussion continued during the workshop 7 and 8. And here we are now at COP28, where the work program finalizes, a decision will be made, and we're going to see what happens. I just want to tell you as well, so that you are aware, that it's publicly available to all of us through the UNFCCC submission portal, which looks like this. You can just Google UNFCCC submission portal, and you will get into a screen like this one. You can have access, it's publicly available, the submissions that have been made by all the negotiation blocks and different countries. If you look at this portal, if you write in the search function adaptation, you will be able to click on it, and you will see on the bottom side of the website what are the submissions that have been made as of yesterday, the day before, and probably today. You will see the submission. The last one was by Turkey, the less developed countries group of negotiators. You will see the African group of negotiators. You will see the submissions there. You can see how the temperature looks like already, because there are many, good for us, references to water. I have to say that several of the partners in the room have made submissions using this submission portal. This submission portal is open to parties, but it's also open to observers, and observers can make submissions to this work program. We have made submissions. The good thing is that the water stakeholders have made several submissions. What you can see on the screen is a submission made by Sanitation and Water for All and 13 organizations standing as authors of this submission. In this submission, it's a submission that comes from water and sanitation perspective, as you could imagine, from Sanitation and Water for All and partners. But there, we made very clear that our submission was only a part of the water security set of dimensions. It is part of this submission. We made clear that the water stakeholders go beyond water and sanitation services and encompasses all these dimensions that you see on the screen now, including the ecosystems, including the food and energy nexus, including the water-related hazards, and including water and sanitation services. We made that very clear, and sorry, this is the slide that I was referring to. And we went one step further. And already in April, when the discussions were not so advanced on targets and indicators, we did propose a set of targets for consideration of the parties. We outlined this diagram where we picture people that are exposed to climate hazards in the center, and we explained that there are billions of people, as you can see on the right, that already have access to water and sanitation, but there are billions of people on the left that they don't have access to water and sanitation. We want to bring to the attention of climate negotiators that there are two important overlaps, if you see in the figure, because when you have the overlap of those that they are highly exposed to climate hazards and they don't have basic services, those need to be prioritized and they need to be provided with climate resilient solutions, right? Because there is no community resilience if you live in a community that don't have access to basic services. You cannot dream on with resilience. There is no resilience to you because you don't even have access to basic services. So here we outline a set of targets. We don't need to go into the details of them, but that was through this submission. There are other water submissions that were made through this submission portal that you've seen. The Nature Conservancy and Conservation International made another submission, calling parties and negotiators to pay attention to nature-based solutions. The significant focus that is needed on ecosystem-based adaptation to create an actionable definition for the global goal on adaptation that includes progress and how it's going to be tracked, and different aspects of ecosystem-based adaptation. This submission not just only brought to the attention of negotiators ecosystem-based adaptation, but went one degree further to explain how, what are the checkpoints, right, to consider something an ecosystem-based adaptation. It should be something that it helps people to adapt to climate change. It should be something that reduces social and environmental vulnerabilities. It generates social benefits, etc. Anyway, we don't need to go into the details. Sorry, I need to move this. This is the submission by the Nature Conservancy and Conservation International that I was referring to, and this is the checklist of things that were submitted to the UNFCCC and parties to understand how our perspective in the water sector, what is it that we consider ecosystem-based adaptation. So I'm just finishing now. There's been a pre-COP meeting that already gave us an idea on how, already like at the beginning of November, on how things stand. You know, there were two ministers that were nominated by the COP28 presidency to steer the discussions on adaptation. It's the ministers of Chile and the minister of Australia. They've been commanded to start seeking consensus about among parties to try to get an agreement and to try to expedite what is going on right now, which is the drafting and the negotiations on the text that is to be agreed. Here, already in early November, we got some signs that water is a strong feature within the negotiations. As you can see, there are references to what I have explained before, which is the adaptation cycle, and there are references to the thematic areas. These are the core parts of the negotiation right now. And you see that already in this pre-COP that happened a few weeks ago, there are strong references to food, health, water, infrastructure, the ecosystems, and biodiversity. So we are hopeful that water is really making it into the discussions. Just to finalize this presentation, I just want to already put here 3 key messages that we have drafted, and they are part of the key messages of the Water Pavilion that give us speaking points when we cross a climate negotiator, parties, you know, that want inputs. You know, we have agreed on some narrative that we can tell them. With our 3 key messages for the global goal on adaptation, we are asking the world that as an essential resource for adaptation, water must be highlighted as a strong component of the GGA, whether it's in the dimensions, whether it's in the thematic highlights, etc. We, as a Water Pavilion, stand with the idea that adopting water-related adaptation targets can help with raising the ambition that is needed to achieve the global goal on adaptation. And we bring our expertise as a water community. We make ourselves available to the parties to continue the process, and if water is finally making it to the global goal on adaptation, we are raising the hand and we say to parties that we are here to support them with the development of indicators and the development and refining and policing what a target on global goal on adaptation for water could look like. Yeah, so I just will finish today with the way that I started. 2 days ago, in negotiation room number 5, it was the first meeting of the parties. We were there as observers. As I said before, many countries have spoken, and they have in their opening remarks mentioned water, whether it's calling for specific water targets, whether it's calling for specific references to water. Specifically, water, food, and health seem to be the 3 overarching key themes that are likely to make it in one way or another. What is on stake, again, is at which level targets will be defined and set. We don't know yet at which level. And today, we will have draft text, and we will get the temperature on how the things are being drafted. I will leave it here for now. Thanks.
step in and be MC here for a second and invite our moderator, Daniel Morchain from Nature Conservancy, to come on up. And then, and you can also, we can call forward people. We're moving directly into our panel. We got a little bit of a late start today, but we're still excited to have everyone out here. So I'll let you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Well, thanks for that tremendous background, Carlos and everyone, and Alex also. That was really, it really helped us set the scene for what this is about, what is necessary, what are, Mike? Okay. What are the next steps, right? And I think, we have set it up really nicely here. Just add water. Just add water. It makes sense. It makes sense from every point of view. Then, what's not to like? But we are going to go into the detail of what that might actually look like in the GGA and how to take it forward. Now, logistically, I want to ask a question. Now we are at 10:20. Do we have a 60-minute session still, or yes? Okay, great. Right, so I'll do just a very brief framing, because I think the framing is really there. But what we're trying to do through this session is centering water in the global goal on adaptation, in the GGA, through the many perspectives that exist within our diverse water community. So the water community, as you know, is expansive and multifaceted. And just look at the partners here that form this water pavilion at COP28. And like Carlos, Alex, Leanne before, we're talking about the diversity of this community. It contributes to its strength and to its influence, but it can also make it challenging to develop a single message. And I don't even think it's a single message, but to develop a set of messages that make sense and that can clearly be articulated in the GGA or elsewhere. So that also brings a challenge to this diversity brings that challenge. Today, what we want to do is try to understand what are the unique priorities of different stakeholders, and that's why we have a very varied panel that I'll introduce in a second. And in doing this, we should be aware and highlighting the different perspectives and voices that must be included in any plan to effectively center water in the GGA. So it's not just about doing it and including indicators, it's about, the diversity and how different perspectives, from global to very much local and rooted there, how can they be reflected in the GGA properly? So we'll start by hearing, some commentary, a 5-minute commentary from our different speakers, and each of whom will represent different dimensions of the water security, including wash, ecosystems, hazards, food security, and transboundary issues, and all with a lens of connecting to climate change adaptation. They will help us understand the state of play as it relates to the GGA, and then we'll transition to the panel discussion where we will look at the connections throughout the common themes, and even though the next session is the one that will go into a kind of, as you said, Leslie, try to put in the, start proposing what are the things to include in the GGA. Hopefully here we can already not just be talking at a higher level, but starting to ground the discussion as much as possible. So let me introduce the speakers, and then I'll give you all 5 minutes each to present. I'm going to set my alarm for 5 minutes every time. Then it's gonna go off, people will hear it, you will hear it, and then I'll stand up and awkwardly start kind of making my way towards you then until I make it and say, okay, it has to stop, although you still have a lot to add. So you're very welcome to sit here, speakers, or if you prefer, maybe stay there so you can see the slides, really however you're more comfortable. But maybe as I introduce you, maybe just make yourself known to the rest of us. And forgive me because we haven't had even proper time to know how to pronounce your name. So please, I'm sorry about that. So let me introduce Farai Tunhuma. Farai, right? There you are. So in her current role as UNICEF HQ Senior Advisor on Water and Climate Resilient WASH, Farai supports UNICEF teams, governments, and partners on shifting the wash sector into a low-carbon emitting and climate-resilient sector, delivering sustainable and climate-resilient wash services. So welcome, Farai. You'll soon have the chance to have the floor. Okay, we have here Kirisa Kaspershik. Yes? Okay. Kirisa, welcome. Kirisa is a Climate Policy Director within Conservation International's Global Policy and Government Affairs Division. She leads CI's engagement to advance nature as a climate solution on international policy processes with a focus on the UNFCCC. So, Kirisa, thanks for being here and welcome. We have as well Stefan Uhlenbrock. Yes, there in the back. Stefan, welcome. Dr. Uhlenbrock's main expertise includes water management, hydrological processes, and modeling across scales. For example, floods and droughts, and the water energy food ecosystem nexus. So the water energy food ecosystems nexus. Since 2022, Stefan leads the hydrology, water, and cryosphere branch of the World Meteorological Organization. Welcome, Stefan. And, well, now we have a couple more speakers. First, let's go to Dr. Charity Osei Amponsa. Where are you, Charity? There you are. Dr. Osei Amponsa is a researcher on water governance institutions and inclusion with IMI, the International Water Management Institute. She has plenty of experience in conducting research for development, facilitating multi-stakeholder processes. And last but not least, we have Hanna Plotnikova. Hanna, nice to see you here. She's working at the Secretariat of the Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Water Courses and International Lakes, the Water Convention. Hanna is responsible for the program area on climate change adaptation, including flood and drought management in transboundary basins. So welcome, everyone. You'll have 5 minutes. And I'm sorry, I think you introduced me, Leslie, but yes, right. I just wanted to introduce, but I didn't remember if you had introduced me, and I was like, who is this guy? Yeah, okay, well, I'm Daniel Morchain. I'm the director of the Global Climate Adaptation Team with the Nature Conservancy. So let's move without further ado to the discussions, and well, why don't we start with you, Farai? You'll have 5 minutes, and then, like I said, I'll stand up and come to your post here. You're very welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I'm quite glad to start off by saying I've just ticked off one of the first challenges that the water sector had. So I'll reflect on it a little bit. And it's been our own understanding of the UNFCCC processes and how we plug in so that we can have impact and influence. And just from the conversation this morning, I get a sense that that is no longer a challenge for the sector. When I reflect on the remaining challenges, I will just pick on a few. So we know that the rubber hits the road when we talk about resilience at home, when I drink a cup of water, when I go to the bathroom, when I wash my hands. That is what we call water and sanitation and hygiene. And of course, when we reflect on climate change, the impacts of climate change are really very real for each and every one of us. From the moment we've already woken up, we've already had that reflection. So there are communities, households, and more importantly for us at UNICEF, children who actually need us to say, how do we work on climate change and how do we provide solutions? We know that we have increased hydrogeological variability, we have water scarcity, we are seeing more and more extreme events, very disruptive to our daily lives, and even longer than a day's quantum. So it can go on for a long time for communities to be able to bounce back. We also know that through the UNFCCC processes, water, sanitation, and hygiene has also been one of the sectors where we have had the least investment. So the work around the global goal on adaptation helps us to amplify this need for financing in an already challenged and stressed subsector. In terms of the climate impacts, I'll very quickly summarize by saying we know the obvious ones: water scarcity and drought, and this impact our health and well-being as well as our economic prosperity. We also know heavy rains. We have seen cyclones, and we see them coming more and more frequently, causing massive flooding, inundating our infrastructure, and just making service delivery impossible. We've also seen ice melting, and we can see it as we reflect across what is happening in our cities, Maputo, Cape Town. We see all of this around West Africa and other parts of the world also, where coastal towns are being hammered. And we also know that with this sea level rise, even the little fresh water that we have is now turning salty. So climate change is real, and it's a reality for us all. Now, Alex challenged us not to be fluffy. He challenged us to give solutions and strategies. So here are a few coming from our understanding. So firstly, like I said earlier, we know populations are going to be hit, and there is no question around that. We have been supported, for example, by the assessments coming from the IPCC assessment reports, and they all conclude that our programs, we need to reduce vulnerability by implementing programs that really improve basic health measures, such as the provision of water and sanitation. So we already have a very, very good starting point there. We also know that where there is sanitation, water, and hygiene, as well as water security, which results from all these three working together, we can actually show the interdependency of the upstream conditions, which is the safe treatment of waste, promoting ecosystem health, and ensuring that we have downstream biodiversity and the ecosystem services that we require for us to drink that glass of clean water and to survive every single day. So outlining these key strategies is going to be very important, particularly when we develop our inputs for the global goal on adaptation. And as we have heard already, we are making impact, and we now need to amplify those messages even further. So what are some of the challenges and the opportunities that we see? It's very clear we need to work towards a target on water, sanitation, and hygiene. And we do this in partnership because, as you can see, it's a big network, and we can only make impact together. To get there, we need to prioritize. And as you saw previously, what are we prioritizing? We are reflecting on how we can reduce vulnerability, particularly in those areas where we have high climate impacts and exposure. The link between our work, climate hazards, and exposure is critical. We need to ensure that we have progress made, particularly around our financial systems. Are we leveraging our domestic resources to access climate finance, and are we using it for the right things? And then, of course, we need to ensure that the existing services we have are actually climate-proofed. I'm getting my cue now. So just lastly to say there is urgency. We've heard of NEPs that have taken 10 years, but I'm glad to also hear we have also been able to learn how to do it faster. Let us learn from each other. Let us embed this learning into the articles that we see around the global goal on adaptation. And lastly, let us work together and really push that the progress we've seen already with the country commitments makes it to the cover decision that we want to see at the end of COP28. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farai. That's a great way to set us up in the conversation. Stefan, would you like to continue, please?
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues, friends. Pleasure to be here this morning. You know, I received an email to make this little intervention. I was asked 3 questions. First question was, what are the challenges and opportunities for water-related hazards? So I speak about that part, you know, the climate-related hazards today. Second was on how to address it. So I will speak about 1 and 2 in a minute. And then the third question, what is the urgency of including water in the global goal for adaptation? And I think, you know, how can we say there's no urgency? You know, I think it's super urgent. And I think all what Carlos presented this morning, and I found super interesting. And if I hear about 27, Jose, yeah, so. There's more than one Spanish name, yeah. No, it's super urgent when I hear about 27 goals, you know, that targets. Very interesting, and you said something, water is one of them, you know. I think it's very important to have an own water target in that goal, but water is everywhere. When I hear about a separate target on food security, that's largely about dealing with the increasingly uncertain rainfall. It's largely about covering up for irrigation water demand, and so it's a lot about water in the food security. The same is true for health and wash, and I think you said that. So while it is, I believe, very important to have water as a separate goal, because if it's water not separate target, it's nowhere. Huh? But it's also making sure that it is properly reflected in all the other targets. So first question I was asked, what are the challenges and opportunity in speaking about water-related hazards? I work for the World Meteorological Organization. Yes, we work a lot on floods and droughts, and I think it's, you know, I don't want to preach to the converted too much, but 3 out of 4 hazards are water-related. No? It's about floods and droughts, extremely costly in terms of damages to infrastructure, to the economy, but also costly in the terms of the life of people. 3 out of 4, and there's different categorizations of hazards, and depending how you look at them. But if you look at tropical cyclones, for instance, very important hazard, and at working at World Meteorological Organization, my colleagues are very busy with kind of predicting, understanding tropical cyclones. But it's not the wind that necessarily hurts society so much. It's the rainfall and the flooding afterwards. So even if the hazard type is a tropical cyclone, it's kind of the impact for society is very much water related. So it's the floods and droughts that are critical. Also, fire is another key hazard, and many of my colleagues are working, and it's very important to predict fire and the damage. Was, you know, just looking at Hawaii recently, was it 3 months ago or something, you know, devastating. But again, it's also the rainfall then on the next, after the fire, you know, which kind of completely changes the runoff generation mechanism by impermeable layers and hindering infiltration process, all that. So it's again very much water related. No? Or thinking about extended fire, then the lack of vegetation is the feedback back to the atmosphere, and therefore the rainfall patterns are changing. So it's all kind of interconnected. So I think that's my statement on that. Globally, the observing systems are going down. It's really the wrong trend. We know when it comes to hydrological observing system, the World Bank demonstrated in a recent report that in the developing world, it's about 60-70% of the gauging stations that are either inadequate or in a decaying status, etc. So that makes the predictability of hazards more and more difficult. My second question, and the last from the 3, so I'm messing up your nicely thought through order probably, is kind of how do we incorporate water into the global goal? And speaking about water-related hazards today, what I believe is really critical to have properly formulated in that goal is the importance of early warning systems. The Global Commission on Adaptation a couple of years back, they compared different different adaptation strategies, and made it was a cost-benefit analysis, looking at protecting mangroves in tropical coastal areas, protecting or making water infrastructure more climate resilient, or different crops more salt tolerant, more drought tolerant, and so kind of, and always try to make a cost-benefit estimate, which is super tricky. Of course, cost-benefit analysis are a difficult subject in itself, and they all were in kind of in the order of 1 to 5. So every dollar you put in protecting mangroves or making water infrastructure more resilient, or better drought-tolerant crops, etc., it pays back with the factor 5. So it's kind of a very safe investment. But there was one of the measures which really was standing out, and that's the investment in water in early warning systems. So on average, they estimated the cost-benefit ratio is 1 to 9 or 1 to 10. And you find case studies with 1 to 11. So it really every dollar invested in early warning systems is paying back to society significantly. And it was really standing out compared to the others. When we do that, I'm a biased hydrologist. I like the hydrological measurements and the observing and the predicting of it, but it's really along the whole value chain is necessary. So really from understanding hazards, so what type of hazards, mapping of hazards and really understanding them. Second, observing and predicting hazard. Yeah. And the third is predicting is nice, but if it's not properly communicated to society, it's also useless. So there also the third one is kind of disseminating the information properly to the one who need to act. Yeah? So it's really the whole chain. And then finally, the fourth pillar in the Early Warning for All initiative is then the preparedness and response capacity. So it's a long-term thing. It's not only about a specific event, it's really about kind of getting prepared and being able to respond properly. I think the gentleman is standing up here, so you don't see that, but I think I have to wrap it up.
No, but please, you have a third point.
No,
I'm sure it's important.
my last point, I want to stay in time. The water and climate leaders had their final meeting 2 days ago, and a kind of eminent panel of heads of states and former heads of states and ministers and so on, and convened by the Secretary General of WMO. And had the final report and policy statements, etc., etc. One sentence I found the most interesting. And they said, water is so critical for climate change, for mitigation, for adaptation and building resilience, and I don't need to say that to this audience, but if we take care of water, water helps us to take care of climate, and I think that was a good one. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. That's great, and what a quote to leave us with. But really, the connections you drew, the sense of urgency, and also that explanation of the impacts, it's super important. So, thanks for that. I also want to say that the knowledge integration. I want to put a plug here because we're talking about water and adaptation, and the integration of different knowledge and that our speakers bring here is so important to get it right, not to think of adaptation along the right lines. So we have the modeling, but then we have also the information that other, let's say, non-scientific or non-so-called scientific stakeholders bring to the table. And that integration is so important to advance and to get in the NAPs the right information that is needed. So before going to you, Chris, I want to apologize, Jose. I started the confusion around your name. I don't know what I was thinking. Carlos, Jose here, who gave us the fantastic framing of the session. So sorry for that. And all right, Carissa, now over to you. And I think we all need also to take a little breath of air, because there's so much information and so much coming your way, but it deserves its time and its headspace.
Great, thank you so much, Daniel. This is super interesting. So I'm here as the representative for ecosystems. So at Conservation International, we're very focused on accelerating, scaling nature-based solutions for climate mitigation, adaptation, livelihoods. Yeah, is that better? Oh, yeah, that is better. Okay, sorry. Great, okay. Right. Natural ecosystems for water, right? We're talking about rivers, streams, wetlands, forests, grasslands, and mountains, right? They're all really essential for water security, and the other speakers have mentioned this as well, so that's great to hear already. And natural ecosystems have a very vital role to play in regulating water flow, ensuring water quality, and then reducing the impacts as well from natural disasters that that the last speaker was talking about. So we know that worldwide there are a category of what we call critical natural assets. These are the assets, the ecosystem services that people depend upon for their livelihoods. 87% of the entire world's population, right, they actually benefit from these critical natural assets. But actually, many of these natural assets are left out of the UNFCCC, the CBD. They're not explicitly covered. And so that's why things like the Global Goal on Adaptation and being explicit about the role of ecosystems is so important, because at this point in time, it's not particularly covered very well. On the other hand, we know that 2/3 of people in tropical areas, about 2.7 billion people, are dependent on nature for their basic daily needs. And so this is really important for understanding the the interplay between ecosystems and adaptation, because adaptation is really about people and making sure that people are resilient to climate change. But it's also important to understand that in order for a lot of people to be resilient to climate change, the ecosystems that they depend on also must be resilient to climate change. And we know that the world has already lost 1/3 of its remaining wetlands in the past 50 years. Freshwater ecosystems in general are very poorly managed, and climate change really exacerbates all of these issues that, in terms of water management that we've seen in ecosystem destruction as well. And at 2 degrees of warming, this is all going to be much worse. I think it's up to 3 billion people are going to have water scarcity issues, and that means that the ecosystems they depend on as well are going to be quite damaged. So going on to the global goal on adaptation, right? This is a critical pillar of the Paris Agreement and the work that we're doing, finishing up at this point in time to finish the framework is really essential for putting details to that goal and giving the guidance to, I think as the last speaker was talking about, right, the government who are responsible for putting together national adaptation plans and planning instruments, and making sure that they understand the elements that they need to be prioritizing within their national adaptation plans. And so having the details within the goal will really be so important for making sure that governments, when they're putting their adaptation plans together, are going to be prioritizing ecosystems within that. And that's why we're really excited that ecosystems are currently in the framework and hopefully will continue to remain within the framework. So that, right, it'll improve that planning, monitoring, and evaluation, and focus on ecosystems and their role in adaptation. And so for our priorities, we really would like the framework to have an overarching goal that talks about people being dependent on nature, and as well as more specific quantitative targets, indicators that can ensure that this nexus of people and nature can be well measured, and similar to the way that we measure the mitigation goal. In achieving, right, so we'll have the framework, right, hope that should include, right, as of right now, the ecosystems, freshwater, they are currently included as themes. And then healthy freshwater ecosystems will be then paramount to actually achieving the global goal on adaptation. And for the conservation community, we're focused around a concept of healthy watersheds to enable the adaptation action needed to mitigate extreme floods, resilience to droughts, protecting against storms, and a lot of the hazards that the last speaker was talking about. So a healthy watershed is one where freshwater ecosystems, the biodiversity elements of watersheds, they provide an equitable distribution of benefits now and in the future through collaborative management and governance systems. This is primarily a local endeavor because it really is focused on the watershed scale and the very local context of the needs and cultural context to actually create the effective governance system in those areas. I lost my place. Great. And so, we really actually also need to think about the investment in the nature-based solutions needed to create these healthy watersheds. And so the Global Goal on Adaptation framework should also hopefully be accompanied by some work on finance and scaling finance for nature-based solutions as well, to make sure that especially developing countries have the means of implementation and support that they need to develop robust national adaptation plans to meet the global goal that's in focusing on ecosystems. I'll leave it there. Great.
Thanks very much, Carissa. That, so many points you added, and I think that really thinking of water when it comes to, or thinking of ecosystems when it comes to the water-related contributions to the, to the adaptation and the GGA agenda. So thanks for making us really think deeply about that. And Charity, I'd like to invite you now to share with us what you have.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for the invitation. So I want to start off with the last question. What is the urgency for putting water in the GGA? So we say just put water. I'll be talking about food security, but I want you to know that you are in the right place. The urgency, it's really high. And the action to do this is now. Why am I saying this? Well, I reflect from where I come from. In Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, about 85% of smallholders who are the producers of the food that we eat rely on rainfall for their production, processing, and even in some aspects for the transportation of the food. So water definitely has to be in the GGA, but the question is the how. So I talked briefly about the food security issue and the challenges of water adaptation currently. I think for me, the first thing is how to come up with context-specific water-related adaptation strategies in the goals. That is the issue. How do we also come up with timely, fit-for-purpose interventions, information, climate-related information? How do we get that? So we heard this morning already, it's very difficult to come up with indicators for water adaptation because adaptation, in my context at least, is very, very personal. It's granular. It's really at the household level. So even within a particular household, reducing my resilience is different from the first wife, or whether you are the second wife, or you are the young person in the house, or you are the household leader, or the household head, as we normally call it. And building my adaptive capacity is different. This household's adaptive capacity building will be different from the other one. So it's very complex, and there are several intersections within this complexity. So how do we come to that level of having a kind of single indicator that captures all this complexity? I think it's really difficult. And even at the national level, we see that, at least for Ghana, in the context of Ghana, for the NAPS, water is not there. I think water is mentioned once in that document when we reviewed it. And even that one, it's not directly related to food security. So the issue is the climate change, for me, is water change. And if we are able to change these dynamics, then we will have the transformation, the food transformation system that we are looking for. But then how do we do this? So we come to that question of the how. I think the first thing we need to do is the research. Now, for me, the most challenging thing of getting water adaptation into the GGA is not that we don't have the innovations, it's not that we don't have the water management solutions. Look at all these organizations. We have so much. A lot of tools have been developed. But maybe the most challenge is how do we expect the policymakers, the decision makers, even the farmers, to get the right tool? Because we have so many of them, it's not well coordinated. Sometimes some of the interventions are conflicting and confusing to farmers. So I come with one organization idea of what the water solution should be. Another comes with another intervention that conflicts with the previous one. We are introducing climate smart agriculture all over the place. And we are not coordinating, we are not harmonizing our efforts. So that is the challenge for the policymaker. How do we present ourselves as having some kind of harmonized intervention that we could speak together with into the GGA? Another thing is also about capacity building. at the national level, even if we want to move from the NAPS up to the GGA, how many of these officials understand the processes, and how are we able to build their capacity to be able to incorporate water adaptation strategies at the NAPS level so that we are able to carry it up? Then the last one is about partnerships. I mean, different stakeholders are involved in the water space. How do we bring them together? Effective functional processes that will be able to catalyze the investments that are there. This morning we heard that there's so much funding for even preparing the NAPS, but how do we ensure that we have strong and effective partnerships to get the issues running? So again, I come back, is there urgency? Yes, there is. And action has to be taken now because we all need water for food. So for me, it is climate crisis, water crisis, food crisis. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Charity, for really highlighting the urgency and that connection that you're saying, you know, between there's a GGA, but there's, like you're saying, in Sub-Saharan Africa, 85% of farmers are depending on rain-fed for their crops, for agriculture. So that making that connection, understanding also the challenges, the different adaptive capacities, like you were saying, that's so essential, no? Because if you understand there's so many different adaptive capacity or needs that people have in order to be able to adapt, then you also understand the diversity of adaptation strategies that are necessary. So, Hannah, you're welcome, last but not least, to share your piece.
Hello, dear colleagues. Thanks a lot for invitation to this important event. First of all, I wanted to say that climate impact do not recognize borders, and at the same time, 40% of freshwater flow and actually 60% of freshwater flow and 40% of world's population are in shared basins. So it does mean that transboundary cooperation helps to make climate change adaptation more efficient, and it does so because it helps to reduce uncertainties by sharing data. Also, it helps to improve intersectoral cooperation. And in addition, as it was shown by the recent Adaptation Fund study, it also helps to achieve some cost savings, to share benefits, and even to share knowledge and experience between various stakeholders. More information on how transboundary cooperation can help to address climate change is available in the recent policy brief developed by the Transboundary Water Cooperation Coalition, which includes more than 40 organizations. Well, speaking about the challenges, I would say that one of the main challenges for transboundary dimension is that climate policies are still focusing on the national level. However, I am happy that this is improving and transboundary issues are becoming more recognized in climate change agenda. For example, the recent 6 IPCC assessment reports refers to transboundary risks as those which can increase other risks, especially in water, food, and energy sectors, and which require a climate-informed transboundary management. Then, even the recent report on the technical dialogue of the first global stocktake refers to transboundary risks, and they were also mentioned in a number of documents of the Adaptation Committee under UNFCCC. But even more happy, I am delighted to acknowledge that transboundary issues were discussed by various countries in GGA processes. For example, as transboundary cooperation was mentioned as an enabler for better adaptation and also avoiding maladaptation. The annual 2023 report on GGA actually refers to transboundary in a way that GGA can create an overall opportunity for cooperation, including transboundary dimension, and also that transboundary aspects also can actually help to enhance reporting, communication, and targets on adaptation. And specifically with regards to targets, I would like to mention that there is reporting on SDG indicator 652 on transboundary water management, and UNEC and UNESCO are co-custodian agencies for this indicator. And during recent third reporting exercise, already 126 countries submitted their reports. So it's a proof that transboundary adaptation actually can be measured. Well, how to bring transboundary to GGA? First of all, it is important to involve transboundary basin organizations. Second, it is important to support transboundary assessments, transboundary adaptation plans, and also transboundary early warning systems. Then it is important to mobilize financing for transboundary adaptation, as well as to include the transboundary issues into NEPs and NDCs, and of course to bring transboundary aspects to climate negotiations. And here I would like to mention the Water Convention, which provides a global, unique legal and intergovernmental framework and platform for transboundary cooperation, including for climate change adaptation. Actually, quite a few basins, for example, in Pan-European region, the Danube, the Dniester, the Rhine, but also globally, the Amazon, the Mekong, the Niger, Lake Chad, Lake Victoria, Volta, have developed and already are implementing transboundary adaptation strategies and plans. So these are good examples which we need to bear in mind and to work further on them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for bringing the transboundary aspect to the center of the discussions. I'd like actually to invite you all and the speakers to come here. We're going to have a session of Q&A. Let me set up the chairs here. A couple more, all right, and their mic. So you've all been quite patient to listen to a lot of this super interesting, but still you've been on a listening mode for the whole morning. Thanks for joining here. So I'd like to give you the chance to now ask questions. So let's take about 3 questions from the audience, and then we'll have our speakers here respond to them. So are there any immediate thoughts, questions, comments from, okay, there's one second here, Alex, and we could take a third one if there's a third question.
Yeah, my name is Henk Holtslag from the Meta Smart Center Group. I have a question for Charity. You mentioned rightly there is a lot of innovations around. There's also very scattered activities. So you mentioned the need for capacity building. Now, what is your idea on who should fund this capacity building? Because we all agree we need to build local capacity. But how and who will fund it? That's the question.
Thank you very much. So we'll take still Alex, your question, and then a question from the gentleman here.
Yeah, no, thank you, moderator, and also the speakers. I mean, if we look at the colleagues here, I mean, they represent almost different sub-sectors of water. This is what you see here. You see wash, you see transboundary, you see ecosystems, irrigation, food security. Now, in the global goal for adaptation, we need one number for the water community. How can we have that convergence towards that number? Because as long as we don't, those guys across the other room who are negotiating get very confused. Any good ideas on how we can converge towards what is that one number in terms of a target for water that could be proposed within the global goal for adaptation? Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And the third one still?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Abdul Karim. I'm working for UMI, International Water Management Institute. Hearing to the panel members, hi Stefan, that Alex and colleague here, the global process is a very protracted process, all right? And at the same time, the kind of changes we are witnessing, if you see the IPCC report 2022, they're fast. Things are changing really a lot. And then the global process is really a protracted process. So what can the water community do in order to, while still trying to influence the decision at the global level, the other actions need to continue. I think, what should we do collectively? I'm just like trying to reflect. I mean, I can see parallel tracks trying to influence the negotiations and the decisions, the targets, etc. This is one thing. The other thing is the global community or water community should come together to have its own, basically what they say, walking the talk, basically. Not only waiting until we have something there and then it trickles down. We don't know how it's going to take, I mean, how much it's going to take. And we also heard for countries, the fastest in, you said Zambia or where? 2 years, Zambia. The national process. So even at the national level, it's still a very long process. It's just kind of a reflection, not really a question, but if the panel could reflect on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, and there is a, shall we take, okay, let's take a fourth question still.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Kim. I'm from the International Water Management Institute. I know we're talking in the context of the global goal on adaptation, but I want to add a dimension. We know that a lot of our freshwater systems are affected by non-climatic drivers. So how do we bring that into the conversation here to address the ongoing challenges with sanitation, for example, the poor management in the context of many global south countries, discharge from industrial sectors that are polluting the water system. So how do we bring those in the context of our conversation? Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. So that's a lot coming your way. Let me recap real, and then feel free to take whichever of the questions, right? And then we'll move on. So just quick recap. The first gentleman, sorry, I didn't quite capture your name. It's about really who's going to fund capacity building. That was addressed to charity particularly. Who's going to fund? It's necessary, yes. Who's funding this? Alex was talking about how do different sectors come together for one GGA number, or maybe it's more than one, but you know, for bringing it down to the GGA. Abdul Karim talked about, you know, how does the water community walk the talk? What does it have to do beyond, you know, these big processes? And Andrew's talking about the non-climatic drivers. How do we connect that to the work that we've been talking about here? So over to you. Who'd like to start? We have the mic somewhere, right? Okay. Yeah. Charity, would you like? Yeah.
Thank you so much. And indeed, who will fund? I think that most times we are doing research, but we finish the research and then we have like a policy brief, and we start to engage the policy makers or the policy implementation officers. What could happen is that we incorporate this thinking at the inception of our projects. So already at the beginning, if we all know that, yes, we want to bring the policy officers along, we want to bring these government officials along, even throughout the whole design of the project to the end, then that forms part of the capacity building. And in that process, we also build their capacity and their understanding of the processes, and also the technical backstopping, because most of them do not really understand the technical issues of water, whether it's social science or biophysical science. We need to let them have the right information at the right time. So we do this not only at the national level, because the governance issues are both at the rural level or the district or municipal level and the national level. So first we need to build capacity at that level, and then also at the national level. And we have to find a way of, bridging the gap between the districts and the national level governance systems. So yes, we can carry them along with the research or the projects that we do. In that case, the funding is already embedded in the project, so that we do not ask for additional special funds for that. That could be difficult. But yes, I think colleagues can also add.
Thanks, Charity. Well, there were a number of questions there, so colleagues who would like to add to another question or the same?
I will take the question around global processes, how protracted they are, but what action the sector should take. And indeed, you are right. When yesterday I was listening to some colleagues in this room who actually spoke about how the climate water conversation started in 2010. And we are here and it's 2023. And we have still not got to where we wanted to be. And when I reflect on that journey, I think we have learned many things. Alex gave the example of the Zambia NAP. So how are we taking what we've already learned so that we accelerate? That's a key question. When you go online, when you look at what we are calling climate resilient WASH, there's lots of good stuff. There's also some stuff which we need to set aside. So how are we as a sector embracing the good things that we've already learned in this time frame and set ourselves up for accelerating? One of the things we have tried to do at UNICEF is to implement what we call the climate resilient WASH shift. And it's a commitment to say for every dollar that UNICEF puts into WASH, water sanitation and hygiene, we must demonstrate that it is climate resilient. It's a tall order, so we are still working towards it. But for that process to happen, we have to engage with governments, with partners, our implementing partners, and the people that we work with daily. And we hope as we engage with countries and governments, you start to say, are the things we are investing in climate resilient, so that we already get bang for every buck that we are putting in. And then for those who are here already at COP28, we are going to be having a conversation around how we look at a harmonized definition of climate resilient WASH. Because if we cannot agree together what it is, how do we convince others beyond us that we are doing the right things? And I think more critically, we have seen retardation of global processes, but when they start to move, they move very, very quickly. When we are going to be asked about the quality of what we are delivering and how resilient it is, will we be able to say, yes, indeed, we tick all the boxes around resilience? And then lastly, around how do we get that one number? Alex, that's really hard. When I saw your hand going up, I thought, well, and as expected. But I think as a sector, we do need to reflect around what other sectors are already carrying on behalf of our sector as water. It could be some elements around food. It could be some elements around health. It could be some elements around peace. And what we need to focus on is the missing piece. But what that missing piece is, I still need to figure out myself. So hopefully the other colleagues will be able to share wisdom, particularly on that question.
I can try to take it from there. You know, I think I said before, I work for the Meteorological Organization, and we publish every year the State of the Climate Report. But that's relatively easy. Well, my colleagues are hopefully not in the room, but you know, they have as an indicator the global temperature, global mean temperature, and then it's now at 1.5 degrees above a previous climatic period, and 1.4. So not 1.5 yet, but 1.4, and then it's fluctuating. So and it's a bit complicated if you look which climate data set, temperature data set you take, and so. But overall, they all show the same pattern. For water, I don't think this exists. Another one is the global carbon dioxide concentration. You know, they're measured on a few stations. It's a bit complicated to regionalize, but there's a methodology. For water, I don't think we have that. So there is this one single number is unfortunately not there. And I wouldn't know what we take. And if we take, like for the SDGs, like the percentage of transboundary water agreement for 6.5.2 or something like this, this is only just, this is one aspect of it. So it really doesn't pay the necessary tribute to the complexity of water issues. So we shouldn't try to pack it in one number. So, but how do we deal with this valid question? And when it comes to the target on water, if that remains there, it probably need to be a composite of a number of different things which relate to water and the ecosystem, water and wash, and the economic enabling factor of water, and as well as hazards, what I was speaking about. So we kind of need to kind of bring that together in a composite index. And the other response I would have is water is so critical for health and for food security and so on, to make sure that water elements are there as well.
Yeah.
So I think that, but a single global temperature, the single taking the pulse of water around the world is, I don't think it exists.
Thanks, Stefan, and thanks, Farai, for that. I think these are super important points. And actually, the next session, for those who came in later, we started a bit late, so we'll start the next session just shortly. But we're going to be tackling that question, Alex. But still, there's an opportunity. Kirisa and Hannah, would you like to comment on one of the questions, and then we'll start to wrap things up?
Sure, just quickly, when you asked about one number, the number that came to mind for me is 100%, right? Whatever the indicator is, the goal, because we're talking about the global goal, right? The goal needs to be 100%, right? We need to be looking at getting to coverage of everyone in terms of making sure we're reaching everyone, especially the most climate vulnerable people in areas and those types of things. So that's the ambition we need is 100%, right?
Good point, yeah.
So really quickly on this, on the slowness, right? I think that's another, that the idea of protracted nature of international negotiations and what we do. So I think it's really clear, right, that the world isn't waiting on a global goal on adaptation framework, right? We're not. The world isn't waiting on the UNFCCC to make its decisions, right? I think that it's well known, right, that it's kind of a frustrating process especially for outside observers. It's like, why is this so slow? It's like, we know it's so urgent. Why can't we agree on these types of things? And so I think that that's really the key, right? That there's a lot of amazing work going on, across all of these dimensions. I really like what Charity is talking about in terms of the harmonization. I think that the harmonization is really key, and that is actually kind of one of the benefits of the UNFCCC processes, right? Because what UNFCCC does, even though it's slow, is that it does set international norms and helps with the idea of harmonization and the idea of setting expectations across the entire international community, and helping make sure that we kind of have a global North Star for water ecosystems, and the idea of understanding, when we're going down to the local level, what really is best practice. And making sure that we're sharing those across different regions and experiences and things. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks very much. And Hannah, you have the last word of this round.
I think I will be very brief. So I also agree that it would be very challenging to come up with one number, but it's very important to use what is already available. And as we referred previously to SDG indicator, there is another one, for example, SDG indicator 642 on water management efficiency, which is used to reduce water scarcity. So this is also in the dimension not to make additional burden to countries with reporting. So we need to use what is available. But I actually wanted to add a bit on the other question, what can water community do? And I think that on the practical level in countries, it is very important that the water people talk to climate negotiators, that they bring water to negotiations, that they create, even maybe facilitate establishment of intersectoral groups, which would work on national NDCs, NEPs, climate policies, so that water, including transboundary issues, is there. And here again, I would like to give an example of transboundary basin organizations which work on basin level with countries, and they are quite successful in bringing various sectors. So it's very just important to bring what we're saying here to the practical level on the ground. Thank you.
The how to make that happen, right? It remains so important. So thanks everyone for your super relevant insights. We're going to be wrapping this up. I want to almost leave with a question for everyone. I wish, the next session I think will address this, but we're talking about the global goal on adaptation. We're talking about NAPs and how to introduce these ideas at the national level. Connecting that, I think it was you, Charity, who said to the water change, climate change and water change, connecting that to those realities is the next challenge, because a GGA or an app that doesn't really reflect that need, that reality at the local levels is going to be insufficient, it's inadequate, right, I would say. So I wanted to kind of just leave that as a question from this session to the next one. Congratulate you all also on no slides. There was no slides here. So thanks for that. Wow, that's amazing. This was brought to you as a collaboration between UNDRR, SWA, Sanitation and Water for All, and TNC, the Nature Conservancy. So thanks to everyone. Thank you, Pavilion, and thank you, mostly speakers, for your amazing insight.
And thanks to the moderator, Daniel. And I would like to say that I would like to still keep your attention, because the next session